Welcome to the Sacred Skeptics Podcast. Only two things are required to be a sacred skeptic: the humility to say, I could be wrong, and the courage to follow the truth, wherever it leads. Dealing with current events, cultural issues, and spiritual questions. Here are your hosts, Rick Henderson and Mike Bell.
All right, welcome to the show where the concept of truth is more than a luxury. It's not a pretty little plaything that we like to toy with. It is absolutely indispensable for a life of thriving. Without truth, we cannot have a right relationship with reality. But not everyone thinks like this. If you're listening to me right now, you may not agree with me on that. If you're skeptical of big truth claims and you find yourself opting for personal truth, you're likely throwing a stink eye my way or at the way of folks who like to make a big deal out of others being wrong. Is being right or being wrong really all that important? Is it more important than how we feel? I mean, what if you think, or what if what you do or say really, truly hurts somebody else? And we're going to dive into that today, and we're talking about bad religion. But before we get into that, I'm happy to welcome back into studio our guest co-host, Rob Lambert.
Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going well, man. So let me ask you this thing as we jump in, and we're going to respond to a blog post out there. There's a guy, his name is Mike Frost, and even though his name is Mike Frost, he's all hot and bothered over people calling out Jen Hatmaker, and maybe he's right. We're gonna jump into that. I'm going to seriously engage what he has to say today. But which is more important? What's true or how you feel?
I mean, I feel like, I mean, honestly, it's got to be, and this is hard for people to hear, and some people, like you said, they're not going to agree. Mm-hmm. What is true is always more important than how we feel, because how we feel is deceptive.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, listen, questions communicate, they imply, but they don't explicitly communicate something. And so I recognize when I ask that question, which is more important, what's true or how you feel, a lot of people are saying, well, why are you saying that feelings don't matter? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just throwing out a question. And maybe that question is a bit unfair, but I'm just throwing it out there. Yesterday, I'm having a conversation with my son, and there's something that he doesn't like to do. He does not like to go to karate. It's good for him. I'm making him go to karate. You never know when the Cobra Kai is going to show up. Exactly. I want him to be prepared.
Nobody messes with
I want him to be able to sweep the leg, right?
You're a good dad, Rick.
So anyway, by the way, we both used to work with the mom of Johnny from the original
Isn't that
Karate
insane?
Kid. I got to hang out with him one day.
Nancy Zabka, if you're listening, we
mom
love you.
of Billy Zabka. Billy Zabka, cool dude, jerk in the movie, cool dude in real life.
I never met him. I cannot vouch for that statement. I apologize.
Anyway, I digress. So I'm talking to my son about karate, and he's got a bad attitude about it. He doesn't want to go. And I said, son, listen, this is how you change your attitude. You replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts that are true. It's not enough for it to just be a positive thought. It has to be true. He's like, I said, do you know what that is? And he's like, because you could believe something that makes you feel good, but it may not be true. And I'm like, okay, good job. Nice. You just kind of reported it back to me a little bit, but you're good. Hey, the idea that there is a magical elf that lives at the North Pole that's going to bring me gifts if I'm good enough, that feels good.
Right.
It's positive. It's just not true. And so we're not saying feelings aren't important. We're saying truth is what's most important, and we want to align our feelings with what is true. And so we're going to dive in to old Frosty Mike's blog post here, and he titled it, Farewell, Jen Hatmaker, The Brutality of Unhealthy Religion. Before we even jump in, Rob, do you agree with me? There is unhealthy religion.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Would you agree with me that there are churches who teach what we would say that is true, but those churches are unhealthy?
Bro, I've been on staff at some of those churches.
So you perpetuated the
man, once I knew.
Once you knew, you left. Hey, I grew up on those. It's possible to technically be true in what you teach and have a very unhealthy culture.
Absolutely.
And so maybe old Frosty Mike can shine a light on that for us. And
shine a light, Mike.
Mike, if you're listening, I say that in jest. You can make fun of my name. Here's one of the things that he writes. Not only are he's talking about people like He's talking about conservative evangelicals who have a problem with what Jen Hatmaker and her husband and others teach about embracing homosexuality.
Right.
He says not only are they repudiating her views on various issues, especially same-sex marriage, but they're even attacking her for daring to express the pain that all this criticism is causing her. We're going to get into that a little bit later.
Thank you.
Sadly, this is what happens when religious communities become obsessed with building walls to exclude others. Sooner or later, they start excluding their own, throwing those members they perceive to be recalcitrant, great word, over the wall to the wolves below. And so, Rob, I just want to ask the question, isn't there at least a little bit of irony here that he writes a blog post to publicly call out others for publicly calling out Jen Hatmaker?
Dude, it's Frosty Mike at his best. That's what we're talking about. It's beautiful. It's good. Go, Mike, go.
Hey, all right. It's just a difficult starting point to say it's wrong to say you're out of bounds for saying someone is out of bounds.
Right.
That's just a weird, naturally incoherent starting point.
Yes. It's crazy. It's crazy that I get if there's a problem with I get if they have a problem with the way that people are approaching it and this idea of like throwing them over the wall to the wolves.
Yeah,
okay.
there you go.
But it is not. It can't be not okay to approach somebody who is out of bounds.
Frosty Mike does not say, listen, hey, there are times that there are certain things that are unacceptable, but you have to respond to that in appropriate ways.
Right.
He doesn't say that.
That would be one thing.
He just starts off with the implication that I'm going to call out people because it's wrong to call out people. It's just a little weird. He goes on to say, "Hey, I'm not saying conservative evangelicalism is as bad as Jonestown," throwing in a little cult reference where everybody drank the Kool-Aid and killed themselves. But I do know this: once the pack starts circling an identified victim, there's very little stopping it. He's using some metaphor language here that makes it sound like evangelical culture is wolf-like. Okay, that's interesting. And if you think I'm exaggerating, recall John Piper's incendiary tweet, "Farewell, Rob Bell," written in response to Bell's book, Love Wins. And over the wall you go, Rob Bell. Now, if you guys remember a few years ago, Rob Bell wrote a book. It's more than a few years ago, but he wrote a book essentially saying that Christians in turn interpret the Bible massively incorrect. There's essentially no such thing as hell, and people don't go to hell. Regardless of what you think about that, okay, about his interpretation, what are pastors supposed to do? What are church leaders supposed to do when they recognize another influential person teaching something that they think is massively incorrect?
And let's talk about the idea of it being not only somebody who's teaching something that they think is massively incorrect, but somebody who has such a platform and is such a person of influence within that culture. Yeah. That's a big deal.
Now, I think that it was a pretty knuckleheaded and insensitive move of John Piper to tweet that, and I think he apologized later. I mean, he might have a handler who tweets for him. Yeah. Hey, but intern. We are all aware in this current political climate that Twitter goes rogue really easily. Some people just weren't made for Twitter. Can we just say that? Can we just throw it out there? Some people weren't made for it.
I think most people weren't made for Twitter, if we're being honest. Holy cow.
All right. But, okay, so what are pastors? What are they supposed to do? It's one thing to say, hey, how you did this is wrong. You need to be a bit more loving. You need to be softer in your approach to saying this is wrong. This is out of bounds. But when someone is teaching bad theology, when someone is teaching doctrine that is not true, is that a big deal? Does that even matter?
I mean, of course. It has to. And we have to get into this place where I think we can agree that kind of what you said earlier, if somebody comes out with sort of this new idea, this new teaching, almost like this new revelation that they've had, that's a red flag.
Sure.
That needs to be a red flag for sure.
Hey, and this is kind of a sticky grenade here. If you're going to start off with the premise, guys, listen, you need to understand doctrine's not that important. That's a doctrine.
Yeah.
That's a doctrine. That is a guiding set of beliefs that you are trying to get other people to adhere to, that you want to impose on the culture that you're trying to influence by what you're writing.
Yeah.
So if you're starting off with the premise, even if you don't say it, it's implied, doctrine's not that important. That is a doctrine that you find so important that you have to write against people who disagree with you.
Absolutely.
All right, we're having a little fun with Frosty Mike. We're going to continue to take his article seriously when we get back right after the break.